B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Yevamot Daf. We're going to start 9 lines from the top of the Amud. We'll recall that we're in the middle of the topic, the middle of a sentence actually, that started at the bottom of Daf Gimel Amud Beis. Towards the top of Daf Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara said, what's the source that if Shimon dies without children and one of his wives was an erva, one of the 15 aroyes to Reuven, that Reuven does not do and cannot do yibum or chalitza with that wife, with that widow, or any other rivalry wife, any other co-wife of Shimon. And we said the pasuk of Oleo and Litzroir, we have a special pasuk. At the bottom of Daf Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara says, just a moment, if we need a pasuk to say that you don't do yibum, it means that you would have a good reason to believe that you should do yibum. What would that be? For Reuven to marry an erva, his daughter, or a sister of his wife, or whatever other of the 15 aroyas, why should we entertain the idea that Reuven can do yibum with an erva? It's true that yibum is a mitzvah, but marrying an erva is seriously asa. So why would we have entertained that idea? So the Gemara says, well, there's a rule of aseh doicha lois aseh, that the aseh of doing yibum overrides the isser, the lois aseh of marrying an erva. And then we had a Gemara to explain to us the source of aseh doicha lois aseh. And that took us until the middle of Daf Yomi Shiur Beis. And then the Gemara says, okay, granted, aseh doicha lois aseh. And if we would be able to use the rule of aseh doicha lois aseh, we would understand why we need a pasuk to say that in the case of yibum and aroyas, you don't do yibum. But the Gemara says that aseh doicha lois aseh is a regular lois aseh, gets overridden by an aseh. But over here, this is not a regular lois aseh. This is a lois aseh sheyesh by chorus. Marrying an erva is seriously punishable by chorus, and possibly even worse than chorus, which is that in the case where there's Edim, Hasra, and other halachas we're going to learn about later in Shas, it could be the skila, it could be the sreifa, serious punishments. To have a lav sheyesh by chorus, who says that gets overridden by a mitzvah saseh? And if it doesn't get overridden by a mitzvah saseh, the question comes back, we wouldn't entertain the idea of being able to do yibum with an erva, so why do I need a pasuk to tell me you cannot do yibum with an erva? So the Gemara suggested 4 different sources that aseh doicha lois aseh sheyesh bei chorus, Mila on Shabbos, Korban Pesach on Shabbos, Korban Tomid on Shabbos, and Kibbud of V'eim, that where it would involve Chilul Shabbos. And the Gemara said that none of those are proof that in a regular basis an aseh would be doicha lois aseh sheyesh bei chorus. So now the Gemara here on Daf Vav is going to try a 5th but not last source that aseh doicha lois aseh sheyesh bei chorus. Elo sol kedai techamina, I may have thought, says the Gemara, teisa mi binyan beis hamikdash. Regarding the halacha of building the beis hamikdash, which is a mitzvah aseh, it says in the Chumash, v'osu li mikdash, make for me a beis hamikdash. And how about building the beis hamikdash on Shabbos? Shabbos is a lav sheyesh bei chorus. Building the beis hamikdash is an aseh. Do we find that the mitzvah aseh of building the Beis Hamikdash overrides the lav sheyesh bei chorus of Shabbos? It seems that yes, because we're about to see that we need a special pasuk to tell us that you do not build the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos. And it would seem that from here we see that in the event that we wouldn't have the pasuk, and any case where you don't have a pasuk, any other aseh and a lav sheyesh bei chorus, we would override the lav with an aseh. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, Yochil yehei binyan beis hamikdash doicha Shabbos, we would entertain the idea that the mitzvah aseh of v'osu li mikdash overrides the lav sheyesh bei chorus of Shabbos. Talmud Leima, and therefore we need a special pasuk that says, Es shabsoisai tishmeiru umikdashi tiro ani Hashem, that you should protect, you should guard Shabbos. Umikdashi tiro, you should have reverence and awe for the Beis Hamikdash, ani Hashem. What does that mean? That kulchem chayovim b'chvoidi, that all of you, that means you people and you Beis Hamikdash, right, have to have awe and have to respect the Shabbos, as Shabsai tishmeiru chayovim b'chvoidi. You have to honor me, Hashem, with the Shabbos. So, my love, can we not assume that what part of Mikdashi Tiro, what part of building the Beis Hamikdash would we have thought you can do on Shabbos, if not for the fact that it's written together with Es Shabsai Tishmeiru? But boy never says so. Are we not talking about one or more of the 39 melachos, like building, demolishing, which is punishable by chorus. In which case, the only reason you don't build the Beis Hamikdash transgressing one of the Lamates melachos is because you have a special pasuk that says that you, Beis Hamikdash, have to also respect Shabbos. Holav hochi, but any case where you don't have this pasuk, dochi, we see that an asay can override loisas hashesh boikoros. So here we have a makor that asay doich loisas hashesh boikoros, and therefore we now understand why you need a special pasuk by Yibum to say that even though the asay of Yibum would override the loisas hashesh boikoros of Aroyas, and you should do Yibum, no. Oleho, the pasuk we mentioned before in Daf Gimel, says don't do Yibum. So that would be a good answer in the Gemara. Says the Gemara again, for the fifth time, loy. This is not a good enough source that on a regular case of Yibum, that asay doichaloisas hashesh beikoros. Because it could be that in the Chilul Shabbos, that would be involved in building the Beis Hamikdash, which involves chorus, like Boina and Saisa, building and demolishing. There, nobody would have dreamt that you can do that on Shabbos, because an asay is not doichalois aseh sheyesh by chorus. So why do I need a pasuk to say that you cannot build the Beis Hamikdash? It's talking about those isurim of Shabbos that are involving a lav de mechamer. And we saw this already at the top of Daf Vav Amud Aleph in the previous source, that there are some isurim on Shabbos which are not punishable by chorus. It's only a lav, and a regular lav, indeed, asay doichalois aseh. The mitzvah asay of v'asuli migdash would override the lav she'en by chorus of mechamer, of encouraging an animal to do a melacha for you. And since we're talking about a lav, therefore I can understand that normally we would say asay doichalois aseh. Comes the pasuk and says Hashem to say no. In this case, building the Beis Hamikdash, don't override the Shabbos, even if it's just a lav. But we have no source that we would ever have an idea or contemplate the idea of asay doichalois aseh sheyesh beikoros. And then the question comes back: so why do I need a pasuk to say that you do not do yibum when it's an erva? Says the Gemara, so are you telling me that from this pasuk, the way we're learning it now, that there's an asay of asuli migdash and a regular loisa asay of mechamer of an Issa Shabbos, a lav of Shabbos, and you're saying that this pasuk teaches us that you cannot build the Beis Hamikdash? If so, then why are you so sure that there's always a rule of asay doichalois aseh, as we learned earlier on from Kilayim and Tzitzis, Ligmer Mehocha? We should learn from here, from the fact that you do not build the Beis Hamikdash if it transgresses a lav of Shabbos, Deloi Dachi. That we should learn from here that this asay is not doichalois aseh. V'chi teima, are you going to say that a regular asay is doichalois aseh? And indeed, only here, Shani Lavi de Shabbos de Chamiri, maybe only regarding Shabbos, where the stringencies of lav, the stringencies of Shabbos are more stringent than other lavim, and therefore over here we have the pasuk that says don't override Shabbos by doing the mitzvah asay, even if it's the Shabbos is just a lav, by doing the mitzvah asay of building the Beis Hamikdash. But maybe a regular asay, doichalois aseh, we would say. It says that we have proof that that's not the case. We find Tanoim in other areas with other halachas, and actually this Gemara, we saw this already before, that the Gemara actually compares and uses this pasuk of Hashem to tell us that even other halachas, not only Shabbos, we do not override. And the Gemara doesn't say Shabbos is different because the lav of Shabbos is more stringent. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, Yochil Omar le'oviv hitami. If a father says to his son, they are koyanim, and says, go into Beis HaKvaros and become Tommy, or Yisha Omar le'al tarzir, or he says to him, don't do the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, and both of these are lavim. Yochil Yishmaloi, I may have thought that you would listen to the father. Talmud Lema says in the pasuk, Ish imoy v'oviv tiro v'gomer. It's not this pasuk, it's a different pasuk, the pasuk we saw on Daf Yomi Shiur. The pasuk says, Ish imoy v'oviv tiro v'eschapsoisai tishmoiru ani Hashem Elokeichem v'gomer, etc. And we saw before that over there the Gemara says that I would have thought that if a parent tells a child to to honor him by transgressing Shabbos, I may have thought that you would listen to the parent. We need a special pasuk to say that you parents are also required to honor the Shabbos, and therefore the son does not need to listen. And we learn from there also to the halachas of a son not listening to his parents regarding becoming tomei if he's a kohen, or the son not listening to his parents regarding not doing the mitzvah of returning a lost property, hashavas aveda. Kulchem chayovim b'chvoidi, because the parents are equally required to honor Hashem and his mitzvahs as the son. So why doesn't the Gemara say that you cannot learn from Ish Imoy Vaviv Tiroves Shabsoitai Tishmoiru to the halachas of Tumah and the halachas of Hashavas Aveda, because Shabbos is more stringent. So you see that Shabbos is not necessarily more stringent, or we don't use its stringency to refute this, and the lav of Shabbos is similar to all other lavim. And if the lav of Shabbos is similar to all other lavim, and then here we say, don't build the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos, I have proof that you just don't say Aseh Doichalei Saseh, contrary to what we know that Aseh Doichalei Saseh. And since we know that the rule is Aseh Doichalei Saseh, then it must be that we don't have a source to say that Aseh is not Doichalei Saseh. So it must be, as Shabsoisai Tishmeru Migdoshi Tiro is not talking about the Lav de Mechamer. It's not talking about Lav de Mechamer. It must be talking about the Binyan or Stira, the building and demolishing, which is a Lav Sheyesh Boi Koros. And indeed, an Lois Aseh Sheyesh Boi Koros does not get overridden only because it's in the Pasuk as Shabsoisai Tishmeru or Migdoshi Tiro regarding Shabbos, that the Shabbos, the Lav Shesh Beikoros of Shabbos, does not get overridden by the mitzvah saseh of building the Beis HaMikdash. But any other Lav Shesh Beikoros does get overridden by a mitzvah saseh. And then we're back to the good answer in our Gemara that the Yibum, where you don't have a special pasuk, that, I'm saying Yibum, which is not the Es Shabsoisai Tishmoru Migdoshi Tiro, so we would say that the Aseh of Yibum overrides the Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros of Aroyis, and that's why I need Oleo in the parish of Yibum to say that you do not do Yibum. Says the Gemara, okay, but we still have a refutation. Elo mishum de'ikah lemifroch, ma lahanoch shekein hechsher mitzvah. There's still a difference between this pasuk here, where we see in the pasuk that when it comes to building the Beis HaMikdash, by transgressing Shabbos, Binyan Ostira, which is a Lav Sheyesh Beikoros, then we indeed see that we need a special pasuk to say that you do not override Shabbos in order to build the Beis HaMikdash. And indeed, we would deduce that this type of situation, then a regular place without a pasuk, Aseh would be Doichalei Saseh Sheyesh Beikoros. But that would not yet tell us that in the case of Yibum, without a special pasuk, we would say that Aseh is Doichalei Saseh Sheyesh Beikoros. Why? Because Ma Lahanoch Shekein Hechsher Mitzvah. When it comes to building the Beis HaMikdash, you need to build, you need to demolish Binyan Ostira. There's no other way of building a Beis HaMikdash. So I may have thought that if there's no other way of building the Beis HaMikdash, that type of Aseh overrides a Lav Sheyesh Beikoros, and therefore we need a special pasuk for those cases where we're not allowed to transgress any Lavim Sheyesh Beikoros. But in the case of Yibum, there's another way to resolve the issue of these widows, and that's not doing Yibum, it's doing Chalitza. So maybe there we would never have entertained the idea that the mitzvah of Yibum overrides the Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros of Aroyis. And therefore again the question comes back, that why do we need Oleo? Says the Gemara, because Hechsher Mitzvah, if all this pasuk of Shabsoisei Tishmeru Migdoshi Tiro is teaching us that where there's an Aseh, which is a Hechsher Mitzvah, which means a type of Aseh, that the only way that you can fulfill the Aseh and do the Aseh is by overriding the Lav Sheyesh Beikoros, and only there, in the absence of a pasuk, we say Aseh Doichalei Sheyesh Beikoros. We don't need this pasuk of Shabsoisei Tishmeru Migdoshi Tiro to tell us that. Teipeklei Mihosam. We'll remember from Daf Yomi Shiur, we already have the pasuk of Ish Imoy Vaviv Tiro Shabsoisei Tishmeru. That over there we learnt that just in the same way as building the Beis HaMikdash cannot be done without building and demolishing, so too fulfilling a parent's wish. When a parent says, cook for me, shecht for me, there's no other way of fulfilling, honoring one's parents without doing these lavim, without the shlita and or bishul, which is a lav sheyesh beikoros. And over there we already said in the pasuk that Shabbos does not allow itself to get overridden by such an aseh. So in exactly the same way as Ish Imay V'Aviv Tiro doesn't override Shabbos, as nor would the Mikdashi Tiro override Shabbos. And if the Mikdashi Tiro would not override Shabbos, why do I need a special pasuk to say you cannot build the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos? So would we not assume that it's in order to tell us that what we said before, Einoi Inyan Tenehu Le'inyan, which means that if the pasuk is telling me something that I seems to be able to learn from elsewhere, we use this to learn something else. So since from Ish Imay V'Aviv Tiro Ves Shabsoi Say Tishmoiru we learn that an asay, which is Hechsher Mitzvah, there's no other way of doing an asay without transgressing the Lav Sheesh Beikoros, does not override Shabbos, and any other asay which is Hechsher Mitzvah, is Doicha, a Lav Sheesh Beikoros, in the absence of a Pasuk, then this Pasuk, as Shabsoi Say Tishmoiru Mikdashi Tiro, must be teaching us that in the absence of a Pasuk, even a regular assay, which is not Hechsher Mitzvah, a regular assay like Yibum, overrides a Lav Sheesh Beikoros. In which case, we now still have a good answer that why we need Oleo. We need Oleo to tell us that in the case of Yibum, where we normally would have said Asay is Doicha Lois Asay Sheesh Beikoros, and says the Pasuk, Oleo, don't do Yibum. Says the Gemara, no. Enochanami, that I hear your point, that we do not need to learn that you do not override Shabbos by doing the mitzvah, which cannot be done in any other way, of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. And we would learn that not from Es Shabsoi Tishmoiru Mikdashi Tiro, rather from Ish Imay V'Aviv Tiro, Ves Shabsoi Tishmoiru. And I hear your question, why do I need the pasuk of Es Shabsoi Tishmoiru Mikdashi Tiro? But it's not what you're saying, says the Gemara. Don't come to the conclusion that this pasuk must be telling us that an asay, even if it's not Hechsher Mitzvah, an asay like Yibum overrides a Lav Sheesh Beikoros. No. That's not what this pasuk of Es Shabsoi Tishmoiru Mikdashi Tiro is teaching us. Rather, it's teaching us something completely different. What's it teaching us? Es Shabsoi Tishmoiru Mikdashi Tiro Lomali. What's it coming to teach us? Miboy Lele Kedetanya. I need it as in the following brisa. Yachol Yisyori Odom Mimigdash. I may have thought that a person has to have awe and reverence, fear of the Beis HaMikdash itself. Talmud Leiman, no. It says in the pasuk Es Shabsoi Tishmoiru. Regarding Shabbos, it says Shmira, guard it, protect it. Ves Mikdashi Tiro, and the Beis HaMikdash, you should awe. Nemra Shmira b'Shabbos, the term used in the pasuk regarding Shabbos is Shmira. V'nemra Moira b'Mikdash, the term used for the Mikdashi, for the Beis HaMikdash, is Moira, is fear, is awe, is reverence. Ma Shmira ho'amura b'Shabbos. In the same way as when it comes to Shmiras Shabbos, La loy mi Shabbos atom misyori. It doesn't say the concept of yira, of awe, reverence regarding Shabbos. It says Shabbos has to be protected. So there's no yira of Shabbos itself. Elo mimisha hizir ala Shabbos. But we know there is a concept of having awe and fear of the Hashem who commanded us on Shabbos. Af moira ha'amura b'mikdash, so too, and it says in Mikdashi Tiro, the moira mentioned in the context of the Beis HaMikdash, loy mi mikdash ata misyori. It's not that you have awe and reverence for the actual Beis HaMikdash. Elo mimisha hizir ala mikdash. You have reverence for the Hashem who commanded us for the Beis HaMikdash. The Brisa continues, Ve'ezeu moira mikdash. How does one express one's awe and reverence for the Beis HaMikdash? Lo yikonis odom b'harabayis b'makle. A person shouldn't go onto harabayis with his stick, b'min ole with his shoes, b'pundasoi with his money belt, u'ba'avak shal gabi raglov, or with dust on his feet. V'lo yasenu kapandria. You shouldn't make the harabayis a shortcut to go into one entrance and leave through the other entrance just to make it shorter. Or a kika. And you're not allowed to spit on harabayis. Mikal v'chayme. It's learned out from Mikal v'chayme that, and from the Gemara in Brachos Daf Samach Beis, that from the fact that Mordechai Tzaddik was not allowed or didn't want to come into the king's palace with sackclothes, and sackcloth is much less repulsive as spitting. If you're not allowed to go into a royal palace with sackclothes, of course you're not allowed to spit there. That's the Kal v'chayme. All that would seem it's only when the Beis HaMikdash is standing. How do you know that the halachas of kovod for the harabayis apply even when the Beis HaMikdash is not standing? Talmud Lema, it says in this pasuk we quoted, that the Moira Mikdash is compared and written in the same pasuk as Shmiras Shabbos. In the same way as Shmiras Shabbos is la'olam, is eternal, and it's not dependent on the Beis HaMikdash. Af Moira ha'amura b'Mikdash, the awe and reverence of the Beis Hamikdash also la'olam is even when the Beis Hamikdash is not standing. So we've now understood that the pasuk of Es Shabsoisai Tishmeiru Umikdashi Tiro is not teaching us that you're not allowed to build the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos, because building the Beis Hamikdash is a lav, which is an asay of hechsher mitzvah, and an asay of hechsher mitzvah does not override Shabbos. We already know that from Ish Imoy V'Aviv Tiro Ves Shabsoisai Tishmeiru. And in the absence of these psukim, of this pasuk of Ish Imoy V'Aviv Tiro, a regular asay, which is hechsher mitzvah, may well override an lav sheyesh beikaros. An asay which is not hechsher mitzvah like yibum, we have no reason in the world to say that it would override a lav sheyesh beikaros. So the question comes back, why do I need a special pasuk to tell us you do not do yibum? Elo says the Gemara, this is the sixth and final attempt to find a source that an asay is doicha, a regular asay is doicha a lav sheyesh beikaros. Solka daita chamina, we may have thought that you can learn it out from mehavara. Havara means lighting a fire, and one of the places or times that it would be necessary to light a fire is when the Beis Din would have to kill somebody, and they would be killed with sreifa. Then the lead would have to be melted on a fire. They would light a fire and melt the lead. So the Tana de Rabbi Shmuel. We're now going to have an interesting brisa of Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, and this brisa is going to have 4 parts, and we're going to have 2/3 ways of 2 or 3 tracks on how to understand the whole discussion in this brisa. And before we're seeing it inside, we'll just say it. We'll say it by heart, just so we should get a basic introduction. There's a pasuk in the Chumash that says, "Lo yisevaru eish b'chol mishvasechem b'yoyim haShabbos." You're not allowed to kindle a fire on Shabbos. It's a pasuk in the Torah. The question is, why does the Torah have to say "Lo yisevaru eish"? So the Gemara is going to discuss what's the question. Why it needs to say it. We know why it needs to say it. We'll see it inside. But either way, the Gemara, the Brisa has a question that there's something about the pasuk of Leisavaru Eish B'chol Mishvasechem that didn't need to be there and is coming to teach us something. There's some type of fire you're not allowed to do, and we may have thought that you are allowed to do it. And the Brisa is now going to go in 3 stages. It's going to say that from the general posuk of mechaleho mois yumos, that if you transgress Shabbos, ushmartem es Shabbos ki kodesh ilochem, mechaleleo mois yumos, ki koloise b'malocha v'nichros ha'nefesh hi mekerev amo, the posuk says you're not allowed to transgress Shabbos. So I may have thought, what happens if the Beis Din need to transgress Shabbos to light a fire in order to melt the lead that was going to kill somebody that needs to be killed? So the first step is going to be that this pasuk is not talking about Beis Din, and Beis Din are allowed to light a fire. Then the Brisa is going to say, no, maybe even Beis Din are not allowed to light a fire. And then the Gemara is going to say, the Brisa is going to say, no, maybe Beis Din is allowed to light a fire on Shabbos in order to melt the lead. And then the Gemara says, oh, that's what we need to say, that no, that Beis Din are not allowed to light this fire for the lead on Shabbos. So we're going to have 3 steps. Step 1, they are allowed to light the fire. Step 2, they're not allowed to light the fire. Step 3, they are allowed to light the fire. Step 4, the pasuk says, no, they're not allowed to light the fire. And we're now going to have 2 tracks, how to understand what was the discussion here. The first track is going to be that when the pasuk says that they're not allowed to light the fire, is to teach us that the asay of killing somebody, which is a mitzvah to kill somebody who's been chayav misa, the pasuk says does not override the lav sheyesh beikoros of making a fire on Shabbos. And then the Gemara will explain the whole backwards and forwards. What did it mean? They should be allowed to, they're not allowed to, they are allowed to, and the pasuk says they're not allowed to. And the Gemara is going to explain that at first we thought they are allowed to because it's asay doicha lois aseh, and then the Brisa says they're not allowed to because it's a lois aseh sheyesh beikoros, and then but maybe they are allowed to because why should there be a difference between a lois aseh and a lois aseh sheyesh beikoros? There should be no difference between the two, and either way, a lav is always more stringent than an aseh. And if aseh is doicha lois aseh, for the same token, it can be doicha lois aseh sheyesh beikoros. So we need a pasuk that says that no, that they are not allowed to, the aseh is not doicha the lois aseh sheyesh beikoros, and you're not allowed to light a fire to kill this person on Shabbos. That is track 1. Track 2 is going to be, there's a completely different discussion. This is not a discussion about Aseh Doicha Lois Aseh or Aseh Doicha Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros. It's to do with, do we have a Kal V'chomer that the mitzvah of killing somebody who needs to be killed overrides Shabbos? So first we thought there is a Kal V'chomer from Avodah, and then stage 2 is that there's no Kal V'chomer because of Mes Mitzvah. Stage 3 is that Mes Mitzvah itself is can be looked at differently. And then the conclusion of the Brisa is that we do not use any of these Kal V'chomers, and you're not allowed to kill this person on Shabbos. So track 2 steers away completely from Aseh Doicha Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros. Track 1 is a discussion of Aseh Doicha Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros. And then we see from here that an Aseh would be Doicha Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros if not for the fact that we have this pasuk. And then that would explain that by Yibum, where there isn't a pasuk, in the event that there wouldn't be a pasuk, Aseh Doicha Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros. And that would be the answer to our question on Daf Gimel, why you need a special pasuk to say that you don't do Yibum with an erva. But that's all in track 1. But we're going to see that according to the other track, then the whole thing doesn't start, because it's not a discussion of Lav Sheyesh Beikoros, and in the middle there's going to be a different track that we could be, that the Gemara is going to suggest, but the Gemara is going to refute it, that we're not talking here. That means even though we're talking about lighting a fire to melt the lead, we're not talking about a Lav Sheyesh Beikoros. And if we're not talking about Lav Sheyesh Beikoros, we're talking about a regular Lav. If it's a regular lav, then the whole discussion is Aseh Doicha Lois Aseh or not, and then we would have, again, no proof that Aseh is Doicha Lois Aseh Sheyesh Beikoros. And that is a summary of the next Gemara. But let's see this inside. The Brisa, the Tana de Be'er B'Shmuel, the Brisa starts like this. Lo yisavaru eish b'chol moishvei seichem. The pasuk says you're not allowed to light a candle b'chol moishvei seichem. You're not allowed to light a fire in any of your dwellings. Ma Talmud Loima. Why does the Torah have to single this out? Why does it have to tell us this? And now the Gemara interjects the Brisa and says, I don't understand. What's the question? Ma Talmud Loima. We've learnt about this elsewhere already. In other places, that there's a machlokes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nosson. We all know that the Torah says don't do melachos on Shabbos. And the Torah singles out, don't light a fire on Shabbos. And there's a discussion why the lighting a fire, lo yisavar eish, was singled out to machlokes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nosson. Il Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi, lelav, according to Rabbi Yossi, is coming to teach us that unlike all the other melachos, which are punishable by chorus and skila, in the case of lo yisavar eish, this is just a regular lav. There's no chorus or skila for this particular melacha. That's according to Rabbi Yossi. Either Rabbi Nosson says no. Rabbi Nosson says, I may have thought you only get chayiv skila or chorus if you transgress all the melachas, all 39. But if you only transgress one of them, maybe you don't get chorus. Says Rabbi Nosson, lechalik. No. The Torah singled out lo yisavar eish to say just any single melacha is enough to be punishable by chorus. So there's a machlokes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nosson whether lighting a fire on Shabbos is actually punishable by chorus. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Hav'ora lelav yotzos. Divrei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says the reason Hav'ora, lighting a fire, lo yisavar eish, is singled out is to tell us that it's only a lav, it doesn't have chorus. Rabbi Nosson Omer lechalik. Rabbi Nosson says that is to teach us that every single activity in and of its own is punishable by chorus. So then, if so, what's the Brisa asking? The Brisa that we started, Tana de Be'er B'Shmuel, Lo yisavar eish b'chol moishvei seichem ma Talmud Loima. What's it teaching us? Well, you know what it's teaching us. Either lechalik or lelav. V'omar Rava. Rava explained no. Tana moishvei kokashele. It says Lo yisavar eish b'chol moishvei seichem in all your dwelling places. That's the question. Why does I need to say b'chol moishvei seichem? That's what was bothering the Brisa. Moishvei ma Talmud Loima. Mechte Shabbos choivas hagofu. We know that the concepts of Shabbos they are halachas that apply to the person. They don't apply to the land. And we know that things that are to do with the land, like kilayim and orlo and trumas and maishos, then we know that they only apply in Eretz Yisrael. But keeping Shabbos has nothing to do with the land. It's in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. So Moishvah is to kosav rachmana b'Shabbos lomoli. So why do I need the extra word to say b'chol Moishvah seichem, that everywhere you are, even in Chutz La'aretz, you have to keep Shabbos? That was the question of the Brisa. Okay, so we know now that the Brisa was asking what the extra word b'chol Moishvah seichem is teaching us. Now let's get back to the Brisa. Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Omar Talmud Echad, the disciple said in the name of his Rebbe Rabbi Shmuel, Lefi shenemar, it says in the pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'chiyeh b'ish chet mishpat moves." If somebody did did an aveira which is punishable by death, for example, he murdered somebody, v'humos, then there's a mitzvah to put him to death. So it says there's a mitzvah to kill somebody who is chayiv misa. Sheme'ani, I may have thought, bein b'chol, bein b'Shabbos. I may have thought that you're allowed to kill this person even on Shabbos. Umani mekayim, but how are we going to understand the pasuk that says umechaleleo mois yumos, that you're not allowed to be mechal Shabbos? B'shar melachis chutz mimisas bezdin. It's talking about other melachis. Don't be mechal Shabbos. If you're mechal Shabbos, mois yumos. But when it comes to the misas bezdin, where we have a mitzvah of v'humos, v'humos is a mitzvah to put him to death. There, that would override the Issa, the Shabbos. It overrides Mechalelel Mois Yumos. That was stage one. That Mechalelel Mois Yumos doesn't apply to Misas Bezdin. Stage two of the Brisa, maybe no. Elo afilu Misas Bezdin, maybe even a Misas Bezdin that you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. Even though there's a mitzvah saseh of a humas, you should kill him, but it says mechaleleo mois yumos, and you're not allowed to, even based in, to kill somebody, you're not allowed to be mechal Shabbos. Umani mekayim v'humas. When am I going to keep the pasuk, the mitzvah saseh of killing somebody who's chayiv misa, b'chayil on a weekday, v'lei b'Shabbos, and not on Shabbos? Now the Bryce is flipping back to the stage 3, going back to what seems to be stage 1. Maybe even on Shabbos, Beis Din are allowed to kill this person because it says v'humos, and mechaleleo mois yumos is talking about is not including misas Beis Din. Talmud Loima, stage 4 of the Brisa. That's what we have the pasuk for. It says le'isavaru eish b'chol moishvei seichem, that you're not allowed to b'chol moishvei seichem under any circumstances. You're not allowed to be mechal Shabbos, and you do not kill this person on Shabbos. Ulhalonu oimer. By Shabbos it says moishvei seichem, and in the case of killing the murderer who oimer, it says in the pasuk v'hoyu eile lochem lechukas mishpat l'deirei seichem b'chol moishvei seichem, and there it's talking about killing a ritzech, and it says there also the words b'chol moishvei seichem. So ma moishvei amurim lahalon bebeis din, in the same way as killing a ritzech only beis din do that, af moishvei amur kan, so too b'chol moishvei seichem, that it says in the context of lo yisavaru eish b'chol moishvei seichem on Shabbos, bebeis din is even in beis din you're not allowed to light a fire in order to kill a person. So that you see klo v'omar achmona, and it says in the Torah lo yisavaru, which means in the context of b'chol moishvei seichem, which we say is talking about beis din, like the b'chol moishvei seichem of killing a ritzech. So and it says lo yisavaru eish, even beis din are not allowed to be mechal Shabbos, not allowed to light a fire in order to kill this person. That is the end of the Brisa. So now the Gemara is saying that what would beis din do? What would beis din have to do that would kill this person, streifa, that we have a whole discussion in the Brisa, and the conclusion that you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos? My love, we assume that means it's talking about lighting a fire, because the lead that is used to kill this person, it's called streifa, by burning his insides, you light a fire. My love, can we not assume that Reb Nosson here, that it's following the opinion of Reb Nosson, and as we saw before, Reb Nosson holds that lighting a fire on Shabbos is punishable by chorus. So he says that the reason that Lo Sevaru Eish is singled out is to teach us that for each malacha in and of its own, there's a chiyuv koros. You don't need to have transgressed all of them together. So what do we see from this brisa? It's only because it says Lo Sevaru that the Beis Din are not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos to kill this person. Then they're not allowed to fulfill the mitzvah saseh of the humos of killing this person and override the lav sheyesh beikoros. Ha'olav hochi. If you wouldn't have had a special pasuk, ha'olav hochi dochi, then a regular case of a mitzvah saseh would override the lav sheyesh beikoros of Shabbos. So here we have the pasuk a source that in the absence of a special pasuk, aseh is doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros. So we understand why yibum would have been something we would entertain the idea of doing yibum with an erva, and that's why we need oleh, the special pasuk, to say we don't do yibum. But here again, the Gemara is going to refute the proof and say, loy, maybe this brisa is following Rabbi Yossi, and according to Rabbi Yossi, the concept of lo sevaru eish is lelav yatzis. It's not an aseh sheyesh, it's not a lav sheyesh beikoros at all. It's a regular lav. In which case, normally we would say aseh doicha lo yisaseh. Because the pasuk says lo sevaru eish b'chol mishvasechem. Don't fulfill the aseh by overriding the lo yisaseh. But there's no proof here that you would ever say aseh doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros. Says the Gemara, but to have a nami Rabbi Yossi. Okay, even if you would say this brisa would be following Rabbi Yossi, Eimed de Omer Rabbi Yossi have ora lelav yatzis. It's true that Rabbi Yossi says that the avera of lighting a fire is singled out, and indeed there's no chorus, but that's only have ora gradus, so that's if you're just lighting a fire. Then you'll be right. Have ora de Beis Din, but over here when Beis Din, they have to light a fire in order to melt the lead, bishul psilahu. There's a wick of lead, or there's the psila of the wick, which is being cooked. And since it's being cooked, there's a melacha of bishul. And bishul, everybody says that it's a lav sheyesh beikoros. V'omer of Sheshes said, Mali bishul psila, Mali bishul samonim. We know that all the 39 prohibited activities on Shabbos are learnt from the Mishkan. In the Mishkan, they would cook the dyes, the herbs, the samonim. What's the difference if you are cooking the samonim or if you're cooking this wick? And therefore, according to Rav Sheshes, there's bishul. And if there's bishul, then again it's a lav sheyesh beikoros. So we have again another answer that we now understand why you need a special pasuk by yibum to say that you do not do yibum, because over here you see that there's at least bishul involved, and you need a special pasuk to say that the Beis Din cannot do bishul, cannot do this lav sheyesh beikoros in order to kill this person. But we can deduce from here that in the absence of such a pasuk, and we understand why we would have entertained the idea of doing yibum with an erva. Says the Gemara, no. Omer of Simi Bar Ashi, Rav Simi Bar Ashi is now going to take us to track 2 that we mentioned before. That the whole brisa is not discussing lav sheyesh beikoros or not. It could be that nobody would ever have entertained the idea of an aseh of a humos overriding a lav sheyesh beikoros. No. Well, the brisa does contemplate the idea that you can kill this person on Shabbos. Why wouldn't it be because aseh doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros? Says of Simi Bar Ashi, no. The reason that we would have killed this person on Shabbos, transgressing a lav sheyesh beikoros, is not because of the regular rules of aseh doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, rather a kal v'chomer. Hai tana lo mishum da asi aseh v'dochi lo yisaseh. That the discussion is, do we learn from a kal v'chomer? We'll soon see what it is, from a kal v'chomer, that you're allowed to kill and burn this person on Shabbos. The Brisa says, when the Gemara is now going to take us through the stages of the 4 stages of the Brisa. When it says that if you transgress Shabbos, then it's punishable by death. Bashar Malachis, that would be talking about other Malachis, Chutz when he says Beis Din, but not including the mitzvah that Beis Din have to kill somebody. They would have to do bishul and they would have to do havara in order to burn the lead to kill this person, to melt the lead and kill this person, and therefore the issa of Mechaleleu L'Mois Yumos is not applying to Beis Din. Aval Misas Beis Din, but in order to kill somebody, indeed, Dachir Shabbos would override Shabbos, but not because it's a mitzvah saseh, and then I say doicha lo yisas hashesh b'koros. No, mikal v'chomer. You learn it from mikal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? And now we're going to learn the relationship between three different mitzvahs. There's the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos. There's the mitzvah of doing avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. And there's the mitzvah to kill somebody. Uma avodah shehi chamura. So avodah is more stringent, so to speak, than Shabbos, because avodah overrides Shabbos. V'doicha Shabbos. We know that avodah overrides Shabbos. The korban tomid involves shlita. Shlita is a malacha on Shabbos. Nonetheless, the korban tomid you're allowed to shecht in the Beis Hamikdash. Ritzicha doicha isa. And to kill somebody who needs to be killed, a murderer needs to be killed, then it overrides avodah. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, that even if he's approaching the mizbeach to do the avodah, we say no, we're taking you away, we're going to kill you. So we see that the mitzvah of killing a murderer overrides the mitzvah of doing avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and doing the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash overrides Shabbos. So Shabbos shenitchem mipnei avodah. If Shabbos, which gets overridden by avodah, can we not? Is there not a kal v'chomer that killing a ritzeach will certainly override the isurim of Shabbos? So you have a kal v'chomer, and that is why we would have entertained the idea of killing him even on Shabbos. And then we would understand why I need a special pasuk to say that the pasuk of Lo Sevaru Eish B'chol Mosh V'Seichem B'Yom HaShabbos, to say that no, don't say this kal v'chomer. But at least we understand the reason we would have contemplated killing this person on Shabbos, doing the havara on Shabbos, is because of a kal v'chomer. Okay, that would be stage one. Stage one of the brisa was that Beis Din are allowed to kindle a fire on Shabbos. Why? As we saw now, a kal v'chomer. If avodah is doicha Shabbos and ritzicha is doicha avodah, ritzicha is doicha Shabbos. Okay, let's go to stage two in the brisa. My oy einoi. Stage two was no, maybe not. Maybe we should not override Shabbos. Maybe you should not be allowed to. We should not be allowed to kill this, to do this lo sevaru eish, to kill this person on Shabbos. So my oy einoi ka'omar. You just said you have a kal v'chomer. What would be a reason not to use the kal v'chomer? Says the Gemara Hochikoma. Because there's an issue with this kal v'chomer. Because kvuras hameis, we know that kvuras meis mitzvah, if you've got somebody who's got no relatives who are attending to his burial, teichiach, we know that kvuras mes mitzvah overrides avodah. And since mes mitzvah overrides avodah, and avodah overrides Shabbos, as we said before. So if were we to say such a kal v'chomer, then we will take it for granted that you can bury a mes mitzvah on Shabbos. But no, mes mitzvah techiach shedoiches avodah, that even though it overrides doing avodah, ve'ein doiches Shabbos. And it does not override Shabbos. You're not allowed to bury a mes mitzvah on Shabbos. So you see that there's a question. We don't use a kal v'chomer. That was the second stage in the brisa, says maybe proof from mes mitzvah not to use the kal v'chomer. Hod Omar, and then the brisa continues. It says no, maybe we should use the kal v'chomer. Well, what happened just to mes mitzvah? It says no. Hod Omar, that kvuras mes mitzvah tidche Shabbos mikal v'chomer. Maybe on the contrary, that in the same way as you use the kal v'chomer to say that you can kill a ritzeach on Shabbos, use that kal v'chomer to say that you can bury a mes mitzvah on Shabbos. Uma avodah sheidoicha Shabbos kvuras mes mitzvah doicha isa. If doing the avodah overrides Shabbos and burying a mes mitzvah overrides avodah, and we know that, how do we know that burying a mes mitzvah overrides avodah? It's on the pasuk that says, "By the kohanim u'la'aviv u'la'imoy la'achiv u'la'achoisoi lo yitameh lohem b'moisam kinezer elokov al roshoi," that a kohen gadol is not allowed to become tomei to any of his relatives. And you learn out from this pasuk, from the extra word of v'la'achoisoi u'la'achoisoi lo yitameh lohem, we learn from there that meis mitzvah overrides avodah. So Shabbos shenitzchem mipnei avodah, Shabbos which is not as strong as avodah, because we saw that avodah overrides Shabbos. Eino din take for us mes mitzvah doicha isa. So stage 3 of the brisa says maybe on the contrary, use the same kal v'chomer that says that you can transgress lo sevaru eish to kill a ritzeach, that you can also bury a mes mitzvah on Shabbos. Stage 4 of the brisa Talmud loimar lo sevaru, The pasuk says, no, lo sevaru, you're not allowed to, don't use the kal v'chomer to say that you can kill the Ritzeach. And once we don't use the kal v'chomer that you can kill the Ritzeach, then it could be that we don't use the kal v'chomer either for meis mitzvah. You cannot bury a meis mitzvah on Shabbos, and you do not kill a Ritzeach on Shabbos. So that is track 2, which is what Rav Simi Bar Ashi said, that the whole brisa is not discussing asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, it's discussing the kal v'chomer. So according to track 2, according to Rav Simi Bar Ashi, our question comes back that since we have no source whatsoever that asay would be doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, why by yibum do we need a pasuk to say that you do not do yibum with an erva? And now, just before we finish the sentence here, we're going back to this brisa, back to track 1. Track 1 was that the discussion of the brisa was, is asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros? We had the pasuk lo sevaru eish, stage 4 of the brisa, that says, no, that in the case of Mrs. Beis Din, you're not allowed to make the fire. And we would deduce from there that only because we have this pasuk, but in the absence of this pasuk, asay would be doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, and then we would have an answer. We would have had an answer had there not been a track 2. Had there only been a track 1, we would have had an answer why by yibum we need to have a pasuk of oleh. So, but there, and when we explained the brisa at first in track 1, there we just went straight to the conclusion that lo sevaru eish tells us that asay is not doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros. But if the discussion is an asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, we have to still understand the first 3 stages. So when we started this, I explained it. Let's see it in the Gemara. The initial understanding of the brisa, the track 1, meikora, da'asi asay v'dochi lo yisaseh, that the discussion is that, and the conclusion is that normally an asay would be doicha lav sheyesh beikoros, and that's why we need a special pasuk lo sevaru eish to say that Beis Din should not be mechal Shabbos to do the mitzvah of v'humos, to kill this person who's chayiv misa. Then my oy einoi de ka'omar, if stage 1 of the brisa would have been that they're allowed to, that the mechaleleo meis yumos is not including Beis Din, because Beis Din are allowed to transgress lo sevaru eish in order to kill this person, and we said the reason for that would be because asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, and that's why we need a pasuk to say that no. If so, what's stage 2? If you can understand that asay is doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, then why would I say otherwise? My oy einoi de ka'omar. Says the Gemara, I'll explain to you the 3 stages of the brisa. Hocha ka'omar. We're going to read into the brisa as follows. When do we say that anyone who breaks Shabbos is punishable by death? Bashar melachos. That's talking about other melachis. Chutz mi Mrs. Beis Din, it's not including Mrs. Beis Din. Aval Mrs. Beis Din. But in stage 1 of the brisa, the Beis Din are dochi Shabbos. They override Shabbos in order to kill this person. But not because asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros. No, da'asi asay v'doicha lo yisaseh. Just a regular asay and lo yisaseh. There's an asay of killing this person, a lo yisaseh of breaking Shabbos, asay doicha lo yisaseh. Comes stage 2 of the brisa and says, Hoda Omar, Eimed Omrin on da'asi asay v'dochi lo yisaseh. When do we use the rule of asay doicha lo yisaseh gereda? That's a regular lo yisaseh, gets overwritten by an asay. But lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, over here we're talking about an is of Shabbos. We're talking about bishul, we're talking about havara, of making a fire. It's a lav sheyesh beikoros. Maybe there you don't say asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros. Mishamis leidadochi. Maybe you don't say that asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros. Hoda Omar, then Bryce in stage 3 says, Otu asay doicha lo yisaseh. We know that asay is doicha lo yisaseh. Lav lo yisaseh chomer minei. Is it not clear to all of us that transgressing a lav is more stringent than not doing an asay? Of course it is. It's punishable by lashes. If you don't do an asay, you don't get that punishment. So in any case, a lav is more stringent than asay, and nonetheless, u'ka'osi asay, the asay comes, v'dochilen overrides it. Mali chumra zutta, mali chumra rabba. What's the difference if the asay overrides something which is a little bit more stringent than itself, which is a lav, or something which is even more stringent than itself, which is a lav sheyesh beikoros? Why should there be a difference? And we should say asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros in the same token as asay doicha lo yisaseh. Talmud loyma, that's what the brisa says in stage 4, lo sevaru, that we need a special posuk indeed to tell us that over here, in the case of of Misas Beis Din, we do not say asay doicha lav sheyesh beikoros, and at this stage in the Gemara we would still say that a regular asay doicha lo yisaseh sheyesh beikoros, a case where you don't have a pasuk like Yibum, we would entertain the idea that you can do Yibum with an erva, and that's why indeed we do have a pasuk, a special pasuk of Oleh to say that you do not do Yibum with an erva. So this would have been how we would understand everything in track 1. But since Rav Simi Bar Ashi took us to track 2, which has nothing to do with Asay Doicha Lo Yisaseh Sheyesh Beikoros, we're back to our question, why do we need the pasuk of Oleh? We have no reason to say that Asay Doicha Lo Yisaseh Sheyesh Beikoros, and therefore we would never have entertained the idea of doing Yibum with an erva. Why do I need a pasuk to say you cannot do Yibum with an erva? And we're back to where we were on Daf Gimel Omid Beis, and in Mitzvah Hashem in the next year we're going to continue from here.